There's a kind of love that doesn't return, not because it was lost, but because it never arrived. It left you whole, sincere, unguarded, and vanished without echo, without answer, without reason. You tried not to notice. You called it a phase, a mistake, an overreaction. You filled your life with noise and motion. But deep down you knew that love didn't disappear from the world. It just remained suspended somewhere between what you gave and what was never received. And in that suspension it settled inside you, like a room that was never occupied but never sealed. You began to live around that room. You decorated the other corners of your soul, lit other lights, chose new routes. But that space remained. And without meaning to, you avoided it. Certain songs, certain scents, certain names, not out of weakness, but out of reverence for what still ached. Because even though it wasn't returned, that love was real. So real it left a mark without presence. So real it sometimes felt like it was still breathing when everything else had moved on. And some nights, with your eyes closed, you could almost sense someone there. Not outside, but within. It wasn't nostalgia for the person. It was a longing for who you were when you loved. That version of you who gave the most delicate, most honest, most pure part of yourself. And maybe the deepest ache wasn't about absence. It was about the stillness of love that had no place to go. Because the love you gave without return didn't disappear. It stayed. And it still lives somewhere inside you. There are objects in your home that remember. A glass without its pair. A book left unfinished. A photo face down in a drawer. These things say nothing, but they hold a silent memory, as if time stopped in them at the exact moment something in you stopped too. They don't accuse, they don't demand, but they keep vigil over what you tried to forget. And in their silence, the persistence of what was once felt remains. You cleaned, moved, changed addresses, but something never left. A scent lingering in the pillow, a gesture while folding clothes, a nameless waiting near sunset. And then you understood. Unreturned love doesn't end. It becomes a trace, a quiet remainder, a shadow that doesn't frighten, but doesn't leave. It lives in the way you treat others now, with a tenderness that needs no recognition, with a care that comes not from habit but from memory. Strangely, that love began to feel beautiful, not because it was fair, but because it revealed something in you, a part you didn't know existed, the part that loves beyond response, gives without armor, reaches with no guarantee. And though it hurt, it lives on, maybe even more alive than all the rest. Because in that one unrewarded gesture, you discovered what you're made of. Not everything passes through memory. Some things root in the body, as if your skin itself witnessed a love that couldn't bloom. The way your shoulders tense when someone gets too close. How your breath catches at the sound of a familiar name. The subtle tremble when you touch certain things. The body remembers, even when the mind insists it's forgotten. Not out of stubbornness, out of loyalty. It becomes the guardian of what was never fully understood, of what didn't get time to unfold. You notice it when you try to love again. There's an invisible line, a delicate border, and when someone crosses it, fear lights up. Not fear of them, fear of yourself, of feeling it all again, of offering without knowing if there will be hands to catch it. And so, you pull back. You set limits. You say you need space, and maybe you do. But deep down, what holds you back isn't absence in the present. It's the unresolved presence of a love that never truly left. The body carries this imprint with a cruel tenderness. It protects, but it also closes. And healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means untying. Loosening the knot between what you offered and what wasn't received. Because until that knot is gently undone, every new love will trip over what still remains. And healing, if it comes, may not be in loving again, but in turning back and saying softly, "You were real, and so was I." You moved on, not out of pride or detachment, but because life asked you to. You took new paths, heard new voices, planted new hopes. But something never fully filled. A quiet echo kept whispering a name, even when everything else had gone still. It wasn't longing for the person, it wasn't a wish to return, it was subtler. The love you gave had shifted. It was no longer theirs. It was yours. Spread within you, changed into gesture. You began to notice it in how you cared for others. A different tenderness not learned but remembered. The way you offered water. The way you listened. The way you noticed pain that hadn't yet spoken. That love hadn't vanished. It had just taken a new direction. One that didn't require recognition, only presence. And in that painful but beautiful truth, you saw something sacred. Even love that isn't returned can become sacred if it reveals who you truly are. Because some loves weren't meant to be shared. They were meant to awaken. They are seeds that don't bloom where you planted them, but bloom elsewhere, carried by the wind. And when you see this, something quiets in you. Not because you've forgotten, but because you've understood. The love you gave without return wasn't wasted. It became part of who you are when no one is looking. Somewhere, in a moment so brief you might not remember, a part of you made a promise. Not aloud, not in words. In a glance, a breath, a stillness. It happened the day your love wasn't met. A quiet vow. Never again will I let it hurt this much. Never again will I offer so fully, so raw. And that unspoken promise became a kind of vow, not to someone else but to yourself. Since then you began measuring affection, not to be cautious, to survive. You gave only what felt safe, showed only what felt certain, not because the love had died, but because fear now stood in its place. And the strange, tender ache is this: you still love. You love behind curtains, quietly, as if holding a candle in a box, afraid the wind will blow it out. But love, when sealed away too long, becomes sorrow. And sorrow doesn't vanish. It waits. It waits for you to remember the promise you made, not to fulfill it, but to release it. Because love isn't protection. It's permission. And even if nothing is returned, there is always a return to who you were, to what you gave, to what still flickers inside, waiting for you to open the box and let the flame breathe. Sometimes the reunion isn't with who left. It's with who you were when you still believed. And that kind of return, though subtle, restores something essential. Not what was lost, but what still longs to be seen. It happens on an ordinary day. In the way sunlight falls on the sidewalk, in a song from a forgotten playlist, in watching someone laugh without defense. You catch your reflection, not as you are, but as you once were. Vulnerable, generous, whole. And suddenly, without trying, something releases. Not the love itself, but the thread that tied it to absence. Because when love goes unanswered, we often tether it to emptiness. We confuse value with reciprocation. But the love you gave doesn't need to be returned to be true. It only needs to be acknowledged, not by them, by you. And when you acknowledge it, your movements soften. Your gaze steadies. Your silence becomes music again. That reunion has no witnesses. It happens deep within, in the quiet between one breath and the next, when you stop waiting for their return and realize it's you who needed to come back. To yourself, to what you felt, to what still longs to move, not in repetition, but in freedom. In time, you understand that the love that never came back doesn't need to, because it's not waiting anymore, it's living in you. In the quiet ways you treat yourself, in the gentleness of your steps, in the care you give without asking. What once hurt becomes ground, what once lacked becomes a shore, and what you gave without return becomes the very way you walk through life. Sometimes you still feel it, a brief ache triggered by a scent, a street, a memory. But it's not a wound now. It's tenderness, a bow to who you were, a quiet recognition that the love you gave, even unanswered, did its work. It revealed your depth. And that is never wasted. Because some live a whole life never touching that place. The place that gives without armor, offers without maps, trusts without return. Now perhaps without knowing, you've become the echo of that love. It lives in how you hold space, in how you wait without pressure, in how you stay without reason. And that staying whole and quiet is proof. Love doesn't end when it's not returned. It just changes homes and lives where it always belonged, inside you. And the phrase that remains when there's nothing left to ask. The love that didn't return never left. It simply learned how to stay. If you too gave a love that never came back, write what still lives in you. Light a word in the comments. Share this with someone who forgot what they once gave. Return when your chest asks for silence.